What do you think are the limitations of large language models, just to make it explicit?
Well, I mean, I think that deep computation is not what large language models do. I mean, it's a different kind of thing. The outer loop of a large language model, if you're trying to do many steps in a computation, the only way you get to do that right now is by spooling out, all the whole chain of thought as a bunch of words, basically. And, you can make a Turing machine out of that if you want to. I just was doing that construction. In principle, you can make an arbitrary computation by just spooling out the words, but it's a bizarre and inefficient way to do it. But it's something where I think that's, sort of the deep computation is, it's really what humans can do quickly. Large language models will probably be able to do well. Anything that you can do kind of off the top of your head type thing is really, is good for large language models. And the things you do off the top of your head, you may not get them always right, but, it's thinking it through the same way we do.
But I wonder if there's an automated way to do something that humans do well much faster, to where it like loops. So generate arbitrary large code bases of Wolfram Language, for example.
Well, the question is, what do you want the code base to do?
Escape control and take over the world.
Okay. So, the thing is, when people say, we want to build this giant thing, right? A giant piece of computational language. In a sense, it's sort of a failure of computational language if the thing you have to build, in other words, if we have a description, if you have a small description, that's the thing that you represent in computational language, and then the computer can compute from that.
Yes.
So in a sense, as soon as you're giving a description, if you have to somehow make that description something, definite, something formal. And to say, okay, I'm going to give this piece of natural language, and then it's going to splurt out this giant formal structure. That, in a sense, that doesn't really make sense, because except insofar as that piece of natural language kind of plugs into what we socially know, so to speak, it plugs into kind of our corpus of knowledge, then that's a way we're capturing a piece of that corpus of knowledge, but hopefully we will have done that in computational language. How do you make it do something that's big? Well, you have to have a way to describe what you want.
I can make it more explicit if you want. How about, I just popped into my head, iterate through all the members of Congress and figure out how to convince them that they have to let me, meaning the system, become president. Pass all the laws that allows AI systems to take control and be the president. I don't know. So that's a very explicit, figure out the individual life story of each congressman, each senator, anybody. I don't know what's required to really kind of pass legislation, and figure out how to control them and manipulate them. Get all the information. What would be the biggest fear of this congressman? And in such a way that you can take action on it in the digital space. So maybe threaten the destruction reputation or something like this. Right.
If I can describe what I want,
yeah,
to what extent can a large language model automate that?
With the help of the concretization of something like Wolfram Language, that makes it more, grounded.
I think it can go rather a long way.
I'm also surprised how quickly I was able to generate.
Yeah, right.
An attack.
That's
I swear I did not think about this before, and it's funny how quickly, which is a very concerning thing, because this idea will probably do quite a bit of damage, and there might be a very large number of other such ideas.
Well, I'll give you a much more benign version of that idea.
Sure.
Okay, you're going to make an AI tutoring system, and that's a benign version of what you're saying is, I want this person to understand this point.
Yes.
You're essentially doing machine learning where the loss function, the thing you're trying to get to is get the human to understand this point. And when you do a test on the human that they correctly understand how this or that works. And I am confident that sort of the large language model type technology combined with computational language is going to be able to do pretty well at teaching us humans things. And it's going to be an interesting phenomenon because, sort of individualized teaching is a thing that has been kind of a goal for a long time. I think we're going to get that. And I think more, that it has many consequences for, like just, if you know me, if you, the AI, know me, tell me, I'm about to do this thing. What are the three things I need to know, given what I already know? Let's say I'm looking at some paper or something, right? It's like there's a version of the summary of that paper that is optimized for me, so to speak, and where it really is, and I think that's really going to work.
It could understand the major gaps in your knowledge.
Yes,
that if filled would actually give you a deeper understanding of the topic. Yeah,
right, and that's an important thing because it really changes. Actually, I think when you think about education and so on, it really changes kind of what's worth doing, what's not worth doing, and so on. It makes I know in my life I've learned lots of different fields, and so I don't know. Every time I'm always think this is the one I'm not going to be able to learn.
Yeah.
But turns out there are sort of meta methods for learning these things in the end. And I think this idea that it becomes easier to it becomes easier to be fed knowledge, so to speak, and it becomes if you need to know this particular thing, you can get taught it in an efficient way. Is something I think is sort of an interesting feature, and I think it makes the things like the value of big towers of specialized knowledge become less significant compared to the kind of meta knowledge of sort of understanding kind of the big picture and being able to connect things together. I think that there's been this huge trend of let's be more and more specialized because we have to we have to sort of ascend these towers of knowledge. But by the time you can get more automation of being able to get to that place on the tower without having to go through all those steps, I think it sort of changes that picture.
Interesting. So your intuition is that in terms of the collective intelligence of the species and the individual minds that make up that collective, they will trend towards being generalists and being kind of philosophers.
That's what I think. I think that's where the humans are going to be useful. I think that a lot of these kind of the drilling, the mechanical working out of things is much more automatable. It's much more AI territory, so to speak.
No more PhDs.
Well, it's interesting. Yes, I mean the kind of the specialization, this kind of tower of specialization, which has been a feature of we've accumulated lots of knowledge in our species, and in a sense every time we have a kind of automation, a building of tools, it becomes less necessary to know that whole tower, and it becomes something where you can just use a tool to get to the top of that tower. I think that the thing that is ultimately when we think about what do the AIs do versus what do the humans do. It's like AIs, you tell them, you say, go achieve this particular objective. Okay, they can maybe figure out a way to achieve that objective. We say, what objective would you like to achieve? The AI has no intrinsic idea of that. It's not a defined thing. That's a thing which has to come from some other entity. And insofar as we are in charge, so to speak, or whatever it is, and our kind of web of society and history and so on is the thing that is defining what objective we want to go to. That's that's a thing that we humans are necessarily involved in. So
to push back a little bit, don't you think that future versions of GPT would be able to give a good answer to what objective would you like to achieve?
On what basis? I mean, if they say, look, here's the terrible thing that could happen, okay? They're taking the average of the internet and they're saying, from the average of the internet, what do people want to do?
Well, that's the Elon Musk adage of the most entertaining outcome is the most likely.
Okay.
So
I haven't heard that one from him, yeah.
That could be one objective, is maximize global entertainment. The dark version of that is drama. The good version of that is fun.
Right. So, I mean, this question of what, if you say to the AI, what does the species want to achieve?
Yes.
Okay.
There'll be an answer, right?
There'll be an answer. It'll be what the average of the internet says the species wants to achieve.
Well, that's. I think you're using the word average very loosely there, right? So, I think the answers will become more and more interesting as these language models are trained better and better.
No, but I mean, in the end, it's a reflection back of what we've already said.
Yes, but it's there's a deeper wisdom to the collective intelligence, presumably, than each individual.
Maybe.
Isn't that what we're trying to do as a society?
To have, well, I mean, that's an important, that's an interesting question. I mean, insofar as some of us, work on trying to innovate and figure out new things and so on, it is sometimes it's a complicated interplay between sort of the individual doing the crazy thing off in some spur, so to speak, versus the collective that's trying to do sort of the high inertia average thing. And it's, sometimes the collective, is bubbling up things that are interesting, and sometimes it's pulling down kind of the attempt to make this kind of innovative direction.
Well, don't you think the large language models will see beyond that simplification? Will say maybe intellectual and career diversity is really important. So you need the crazy people on the outlier, on the outskirts. Right. And so like the actual, what's the purpose of this whole thing is to explore through this kind of dynamics that we've been using as a human civilization, which is most of us focus on one thing. And then there's the crazy people on the outskirts doing the opposite of that one thing, and you kind of pull the whole society together. There's the mainstream science, and then there's the crazy science. And that's just been the history of human civilization. And maybe the AI system will be able to see that. And the more and more impressed we are by a language model telling us this, the more control we'll give it to it. And the more we'll be willing to let it run our society. And hence, there's this kind of loop where the society could be manipulated to let the AI system run it.
Right. Well, I mean, look, one of the things that's sort of interesting is we might say we always think we're making progress. Mm-hmm. But yet, if, in a sense, by saying let's take what already exists and use that as a model for what should exist, then, it's interesting that, for example, many religions have taken that point of view. There is a sacred book that got written at time X, and it defines how people should act for all future time. And that's, it's a model that people have operated with. And in a sense, this is a version of that kind of statement. It's like, take the 2023 version of sort of how the world has exposed itself and use that to define what the world should do in the future.
But it's an imprecise definition, right? Because just like with religious texts and with GPT, the human interpretation of what GPT says will be the perturbation in the system. It'll be the noise. It'll be full of uncertainty. It's not like ChatGPT will tell you exactly what to do. It'll tell you a narrative of what, like it's like a turn the other cheek kind of narrative, right? That's not a fully instructive narrative.
Well, until the AIs control all the systems in the world,
they will be able to very precisely tell you what to do.
Well, they'll do what they'll just do this or that thing, and not only that, they'll be auto-suggesting to each person, do this next, do that next. Yeah. So I think it's a slightly more prescriptive situation than one has typically seen. But I think this whole question of sort of what's left for the humans, so to speak, to what extent do we, this idea that there is an existing kind of corpus of purpose for humans defined by what's on the internet and so on, that's an important thing. But then the question of sort of as we explore what we can think of as the computational universe, as we explore all these different possibilities for what we could do, all these different inventions we could make, all these different things, the question is, which ones do we choose to follow? Those choices are the things that, in a sense, if the humans want to still have kind of human progress, that's what we get to make those choices, so to speak. In other words, there's this idea, if you say, let's take the kind of what exists today and use that as the determiner of all of what there is in the future, the thing that is sort of the opportunity for humans is there will be many possibilities thrown up. There are many different things that could happen or be done. Mm-hmm. And insofar as we want to be in the loop, the thing that makes sense for us to be in the loop doing is picking which of those possibilities we want.
But the degree to which there's a feedback loop, the idea that we're picking something starts becoming questionable because we're influenced by the various systems.
Absolutely.
Like if that becomes more and more source of our education and wisdom and knowledge.
Right. The AIs take over. I mean, I've thought for a long time that, it's the, AR auto-suggestion that's really the thing that makes the AIs take over. It's just then the humans just follow,
Yeah. We will no longer write emails to each other. We'll just send the auto-suggested email.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing where humans are potentially in the loop is when there's a choice. And when there's a choice which we could make based on our kind of whole web of history and so on.
Yeah.
And that's, that's insofar as it's all just, determined, the humans don't have a place. And by the way, I mean, at some level, it's all kind of a complicated philosophical issue because at some level, the universe is just doing what it does. We are parts of that universe that are necessarily doing what we do, so to speak. Yet we feel we have sort of agency in what we're doing. And that's its own separate kind of interesting issue.
And we also kind of feel like we're the final destination of what the universe was meant to create. But we very well could be, and likely are, some kind of intermediate step, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, we're most certainly some intermediate step. The question is if there's some cooler, more complex, more interesting thing that's going to be materialized.
The computational universe is full of such things.
But in our particular pocket, specifically, if this is the best we're going to do or not, that's kind of
we can make all kinds of interesting things in the computational universe. When we look at them, we say, yeah, that's a thing. It doesn't really connect with our current way of thinking about things. I mean, it's like in mathematics. Mm-hmm. We've got certain theorems. There are about 3 or 4 million that human mathematicians have written down and published and so on. But there are an infinite number of possible mathematical theorems. We just go out into the universe of possible theorems and pick another theorem. And then people will say, well, they look at it and they say, I don't know what this theorem means. It's not connected to the things that are part of kind of the web of history that we're dealing with. I think one point to make about sort of understanding AI and its relationship to us is as we have this kind of whole infrastructure of AIs doing their thing and doing their thing in a way that is perhaps not readily understandable by us humans, you might say that's a very weird situation. How come we have built this thing that behaves in a way that we can't understand, that's full of computational irreducibility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What is this? What's it going to feel like when the world is run by AIs whose operations we can't understand? Mm. And the thing one realizes is, actually, we've seen this before. That's what happens when we exist in the natural world. The natural world is full of things that operate according to definite rules. They have all kinds of, computational irreducibility. We don't understand what the natural world is doing. Occasionally, when you say, are the AIs going to wipe us out, for example? Well, it's kind of like, is the machination of the AIs going to lead to this thing that eventually comes and destroys the species? Mm-hmm. Well, we can also ask the same thing about the natural world. Are the machination of the natural world going to eventually lead to this thing that's going to, make the Earth explode or something like this? Those are questions. And insofar as we think we understand what's happening in the natural world, that's a result of science and natural science and so on. One of the things we can expect when there's this giant infrastructure of the AIs is that's where we have to kind of invent a new kind of natural science that kind of is the natural science that explains to us how the AIs work. I mean, it's kind of like we have a horse or something, and we're trying to ride the horse and go from here to there. We don't really understand how the horse works inside, but we can get certain rules and certain, approaches that we take to persuade the horse to go from here to there and take us there. And that's the same type of thing that we're kind of dealing with the sort of incomprehensible, computationally irreducible AIs, but we can identify we can find these kind of pockets of reducibility that we can kind of, we're grabbing onto the mane of the horse or something to be able to ride it. Or we figure out, if we do this or that to ride the horse, that's a successful way to get it to do what we're interested in doing.